All right, so I'm here with Miss Emma Tompkins for my SAS 600 Future of Governments or Future of NCAA Governments interview. Emma, would you mind telling us how you got started in compliance here at Ole Miss?
So I went to law school here at Ole Miss, and my second year of law school, I had heard about an externship opportunity in the compliance office, so interviewed for that. I didn't get it the first time, actually, and then I interviewed again and got it, and then that was like 3 years ago. So I've been here for 3 years now, about a year and a half as an extern, and then a year and a half full-time. I always knew I wanted to work in college athletics, and this just worked out for me.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So what are, to you, some of the biggest challenges currently facing the NCAA's governance structure?
Probably like every single lawsuit against the NCAA is the biggest issue right now, the biggest hurdle to overcome. Obviously, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of unknown with revenue sharing, with transfer portal, with eligibility. I think it's really hard to keep up with all that stuff. A lot of people think NIL is the big hurdle too, but I don't know. I think NIL can be positive in some ways and negative in other ways. So it's just like the change and trying to adapt to the change, I think.
Okay. All right. So my next question is, how do you see the NCAA's role evolving in the era of player NIL rights?
We can see it's evolved quite significantly in the past 4 years. I think it'll continue to evolve. Like I said, we really don't know what a lot of stuff is going to look like, but I do think the NCAA is going to take more of a hands-off approach because they're essentially going to have to, again, with considering the risk of lawsuits and the changing rules.
Okay. Excuse me. With the increasing influence of conferences like the SEC and Big Ten, should the NCAA shift towards a more decentralized governance model?
That, I don't know. I feel like you hear people ask that question all the time. I think it's personal opinion. I think there still needs to be, like the NCAA, there's definitely a benefit to a governing body like the NCAA. But I don't know how they enforce their power anymore in this day and age. So maybe it would be more help. I can't think of the right word, but it would be more beneficial to conferences and schools to have a little bit more autonomy in the governance. But again, do you ever have checks and balances? I feel like the NCAA is a good way to maintain that authority and balance. So one, you don't see these power conferences even though you already see them. Right now, it won't be they can make their own rules anymore. At least there's one set of rules that we all have to kind of play by. I think the NCAA is still beneficial in some ways.
Okay. What potential changes to NCAA governance do you foresee in response to legal pressures such as antitrust lawsuits?
Everything. The NCAA issued a press release that said basically here are the, portions of the manual that are going to be affected, and it was literally every single thing. Financial aid, obviously with roster limits, and now essentially everything's going to become an equivalency sport. Eligibility is going to change because of all the eligibility lawsuits, JUCO stuff. They said recruiting is going to change. I think recruiting would take maybe the least hit change-wise, but I do think they're going to see some changes across the board.
Okay. How can the NCAA balance the interests of Power 5 conferences, mid-major programs, and smaller institutions in its governance decisions?
You're asking good questions. I don't know. I don't think the NCAA knows. I think they're trying their best, but I think the rules are in reality, they have to be different. I mean, as a school like this, an SEC school, any program across the country that's like a huge athletics program just doesn't operate on the same level that a small state school does, which is kind of sad. I think they should all have the same opportunity, but I don't really know how you make that happen.
Yes.
These are tough questions.
Yeah. Do you think the NCAA should adopt a more professionalized structure with independent leadership similar to that of major league sports?
Yeah, have almost like a board. Yeah, I think it would be helpful, but then where do you differentiate between college sports and a professional sport? That's been the whole NCAA's like whole justification. When it went way back, I learned about this in law school. Every time they get sued, they're like this idea of amateurism. People love the idea of like a college athlete as opposed to a professional athlete. So I think we're just trending more towards college athletics looking exactly like professional, except you just make like, now we just require the kids to be in school, but eventually, I mean, how long is that requirement going to be here? So who's going to sue over that?
Yep. How might the NCAA's governance adapt to potential future revenue sharing models for college athletes?
They're trying their best right now, but again, we don't know what it's going to look like post settlement. I mean, obviously we're not privy to all the conversations that are going on, but I'm sure, I would hope, and then I'm sure that the NCAA is working with. I'm talking about the House settlement. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but like I'm sure they're working very closely with the court and everything to kind of adjust the rules accordingly to fit within the settlement. But again, we don't know what that's going to look like. I think it's going to be more like a business model. Like I said, it's going to be more professional. But again, how do you maintain that academic aspect of it and the student before they're an athlete?
All right. Well, last question. If you could propose one major reform to the NCAA governance structure, what would it be and why?
I can look at my phone's ringing.
The last question is, if you could propose one major reform to the NCAA governance structure, what would it be and why?
NIL needs to be reformed, but I don't have the answer as to what it should look like. But I think eventually it's like, right now it's kind of like the housing market bubble in 2008. Like it's just, there's so much money in it and it's like inflated. The value of that money is so inflated. Like these people are getting paid way, way, way more than they should. In some cases, obviously, like I think NIL is a good thing, but I think right now it's not always going to be like feasible to operate like this. But I think part of the settlement is going to be like a clearinghouse, basically, where like the fair market value of these deals are going to be assessed. I think that's a good starting point, but I don't know, how do you do that, and how do you avoid getting sued for such like a subjective, basis? Like, how do you decide the fair market value of like a person's name and image? I don't know. So I think there needs to be reform, but again, we don't know what that's going to look like. I don't think the NCAA knows what that needs to look like. I think it'll be like trial and error for a couple years, but hopefully we're able to adapt quickly enough.
All right. Well, that is all the questions I have. Thank you, Emma.
Of course.
It was a big help, and I enjoyed talking.
Okay, thanks.